Hi, my name's Rich, and today we're going to talk about Eldritch Blast, the Warlock cantrip for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. It's one of the Warlock's signature spells. It's iconic to the class, usually combined with Eldritch Invocations at level 2 to beef up the damage. The base damage is 1d10 force damage, and it's a ranged spell attack. You get 2 beams at level 5, 3 at 11 and 4 at 17. The cantrip itself is just okay. 1d10 damage is good, it's on par with the heavy crossbow, but it's the additional invocations and interactions with the subclass that help solidify why Eldritch Blast is such a sought after cantrip. At level 2 you get Eldritch Invocations, and a lot of these interact with Eldritch Blast. For example, the first one I'm going to cover is Agonizing Blast. It allows you to add your charisma modifier to the damage. So for example, if you have a +3 in charisma modifier, you would do 1d10 +3 force damage. But of course, that applies every time it hits. At 5th level you add the charisma modifier twice, if both hit. It helps stack up and scale with the level. Some of the other Eldritch Invocations that are interacting with Eldritch Blast are Eldritch Spear, which extends the range to 300 feet, Grasp of Hadar, which moves creatures hit by the Eldritch Blast 10 foot in a straight line towards you. It's worth noting that it only triggers once a turn, and this is in contrast with Repelling Blast, which is similar to Grasp of Hadar, except it pushes a creature away 10 foot. And in the text it states that it doesn't trigger once a turn, so in theory, every time you hit with an Eldritch Blast it would push the creature further and further away. It can be used as a very good defensive tool, especially if you combine it with Lance of Lethargy. Lance of Lethargy, when you're hit by the Eldritch Blast, you can reduce the speed of the creature by 10 foot until the end of your next turn. And it can be reapplied each turn. You can also combine this with the invocation Mire the Mind, which allows you to cast slow once a long rest using the Warlock spell slots. It's an expensive use of the spell slot, but if you're really needing to get away from a creature, then it can help out in a pinch. Next up, I'm going to go through the patrons that have ways of interacting and synergizing with Eldritch Blast. The first port of call is the Archfey Patron. You gain access to the Fairy Fire spell. Now Fairy Fire will give you advantage on hits if the creature fails a dexterity save, and if you're trying to hit multiple times this can be reapplied every time, so again it helps stack, much in the same way as Agonizing Blast. The Genie subclass, if you pick the Dao Genie, you gain access to Spike Growth, which puts an area of effect spell. It deals damage recurring. So you can use Grasp of Hadar and Repelling Blast to move the creature in and out of the spike growth. And it's worth noting the spell does not state that it has to be voluntary movement. I've come up against this problem before with Booming Blade, but if you're going in and out of spike growth, regardless of your voluntary or involuntary movement, it's still going to trigger the damage. And Eldritch Blast also interacts with the Genie's Wrath ability, but it is limited to once a turn, so it doesn't stack. The Hexblade has Hexblade's Curse at level 1, which works well with Eldritch Blast, but it's slightly contradicting to the theme of the class. The Hexblade should be focusing on melee combat. Still, getting a critical hit on a 19 or a 20 with multiple Eldritch Blasts a turn is an appealing proposition. With Eldritch Blast, if you multiclass your Warlock into a Sorcerer, you can use Meta Magic to quicken the cantrip and use the Twin Magic ability to potentially get 8 beams a turn. Also, using the Sorcerer Meta Magic, the Spell Sniper feat, and Eldritch Spear, you can get 1200 foot range on Eldritch Blast, but I can't find any practical application for that. If you can think of some way to use that, then leave a comment down below. I would say that Eldritch Blast is better than Firebolt, because fire damage is often more resisted than force damage, and Firebolt has less opportunities to stack extra abilities and modifiers on top of it. whereas Eldritch Blast is more potential for synergy between abilities. Finally, it's worth noting that Eldritch Blast can only target a creature, not objects. You can't force blast your way through treasure chests or open doors or things like that. Oh, before I go, multiclassing into Fighter for 2 levels will allow you to use Action Surge to gain 2 actions in a turn. If you hit level 5, that's 4 potential Eldritch Blasts in a turn. And if you combine that with something like the Hex spell, it really starts racking up the damage and you almost turn into a damage dealing machine. If you have a wizard in your party, you should coerce them into casting haste on you. This can rack up the Eldritch Blasts. I think the archetype with an Eldritch Blast focused Warlock is trying to get as many hits off as possible, almost turning yourself into a machine gun of Eldritch Blasts. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you later. If you want to continue the conversation, I have a Discord server linked in the description. If you want to help support the channel monetarily, I've got a Patreon open at the moment. Currently I'm working on a heist one-shot project, and when that's finished it'll be published on the Patreon. And I'm going to be doing some videos covering the process of how to make the one-shot from start to finish. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you later. Goodbye.